Hello students, welcome back to the channel. In the previous part, we explored how new cities and powerful states emerged across ancient India. In this part, we will explore some fascinating innovations, understand the Varna-Jati system and discover what was happening in different regions of India during the same period. So, let's continue our journey into the past and uncover these important developments. More innovations. The age of the Janapadas and Mahajanapadas was an age of profound change, which would impact Indian civilization until present times. In the chapter India's Cultural Roots in Grade 6, we saw the emergence of several new schools of thought, late Vedic, Buddhist, Jain in particular, and their respective literatures. Those schools disseminated their teachings and literature through scholars, monks and nuns traveling across India or people undertaking pilgrimages. Indian art also underwent a renewal. It will blossom in the age of empires. So, the age of the Janapadas and Mahajanapadas was a period of profound change. This means it was a time of very important changes that had a lasting impact on Indian civilization, and many of those influences can still be seen today. You may remember from grade 6 that during this period, several new schools of thought emerged. A school of thought is a particular way of thinking about life, society and spiritual matters. So, some important examples were the late Vedic tradition, Buddhism and Jainism. These traditions also produced their own literature which helped preserve and spread their ideas. But how did these ideas reach people living in different parts of India? There were no books printed in large numbers, no television and no internet. Their teachings were disseminated or spread widely by scholars, monks and nuns who traveled from place to place. People also undertook pilgrimages, which are journeys to sacred or holy places. Through these travels, ideas and knowledge reached many regions of the country. This period also saw a renewal of Indian art. Art also experienced a fresh development and began taking new forms. These early developments would later blossom, meaning grow and flourish greatly during the age of powerful empires. So, this was not only a time of political changes and growing kingdoms, it was also a time when new ideas, religions, literature and art spread across India and helped shape its future. Urbanization does not happen without technologies. Let us remember that the Harappan civilization mastered copper and bronze metallurgy. Now, in this second urbanization, a major shift in technology involved iron metallurgy. In several regions of India, the techniques of extracting and shaping iron were actually perfected from the early 2nd millennium BCE, but it took a few centuries for iron to become a part of daily life. So, the urbanization, which means the growth and development of towns and cities, depends greatly on technological progress. We have already learned that the Harappan civilization was skilled in metallurgy. Metallurgy is the science and art of extracting and working with metals. The Harappans mastered the use of copper and bronze to make tools, weapons and other useful objects. And during India's second urbanization, an important technological change took place, the growing use of iron. People in several regions of India had already learned how to extract iron from iron ore and shape it into useful objects from the early 2nd millennium BC. However, discovering a technology and using it widely are not the same thing. Although the techniques were known, it took several centuries before iron became a common part of everyday life. Gradually, people began using iron tools and implements more frequently, and this helped agriculture, crafts and the growth of cities. So, one of the key innovations of this period was the increasing use of iron technology, which played an important role in the development of towns and cities. By the 2nd millennium BCE, iron tools had become widespread, facilitating agriculture on a bigger scale. Iron also made better weapons than bronze, lighter and sharper swords, spears, arrows, shields, etc. As it happens, there is some evidence of warfare between neighboring Mahajanapadas. How frequent or how intense it was, of course, is impossible to tell. Such military campaigns, but occasionally alliances too, gave rise to new kingdoms and empires, which we will turn to later in our journey. So, once iron started being used widely, it brought many important changes to society. By the late 2nd millennium BCE, iron tools had become common in many regions. Farmers could clear more land, work faster, and grew more crops. Iron tools helped farmers. As a result, agriculture could be carried out on a much larger scale. Iron was also very useful for making weapons. Iron weapons were often lighter, stronger, and sharper. People used iron to make swords, spears, arrowheads, shields, and other military equipments. Historians have also found some evidence that wars took place between neighboring Mahajanapadas because different Mahajanapadas were becoming more powerful. However, since these events happened so long ago, we cannot say exactly how often these wars occurred or how intense they were. At the same time, kingdoms did not always fight. Sometimes they formed alliances, which means they cooperated and supported each other for mutual benefit. Both warfare and alliances played an important role in shaping ancient India. Some kingdoms became stronger, expanded their territories, and eventually gave rise to larger kingdoms and powerful empires, which we will study later. Another innovation was the first use of coins in India, made necessary by growing trade. Very soon, coins were exchanged across different regions and even with other parts of the world. The first Indian coins were made of silver, a soft metal into which symbols could be punched. They are called punch-marked coins. Later, coins of copper, gold and other metals were also made. Generally, a Mahajanapada issued its own coins, but coins from neighboring regions were used as well as exchanged in trade. So, in ancient times, as trade increased, people also faced the need for a better way to exchange goods. One important innovation during this period was the introduction of the first coins in India. As trade grew between different regions, carrying goods for direct exchange known as barter became inconvenient. Coins made buying and selling much easier. The earliest Indian coins were made of silver. Since silver is a relatively soft metal, symbols could be pressed or punched onto its surface. Because of these marks, these coins are known as punch-marked coins. As trade expanded, these coins did not remain limited to one area. They were exchanged across different regions of India and even reached other parts of the world through trade networks. Later, people began making coins from other metals such as copper and gold. Usually, each Mahajanapada issued its own coins. However, traders often accepted and used coins from neighboring regions as well, which made trade between different kingdoms easier. So, the introduction of coins was an important innovation because it helped trade grow faster and connected different regions more closely. Let's explore. Fill up the following table with the S or tick mark or no or cross mark in each square, which provides an interesting comparison between these two phases of Indian civilization. So here we are comparing two phases of Indian civilization. The first urbanization, which is the Harappan civilization, and the second urbanization, that is Janapadas and Mahajanapadas. And we are given a list of features: Ganga plains, monasteries, literature, trade, warfare, copper or bronze, iron. So for each feature, you have to check whether it was present in that civilization or not and put a tick mark or write yes if the features were present, and put a cross mark or write no if the feature was absent. Ganga plains. The Harappan civilization was mainly located around the Indus River and its tributaries. It did not develop in the Ganga plains. So, we mark no for the Harappans and yes for the second urbanization, because second urbanization took place largely in the fertile Ganga plains. Monasteries. Monasteries are places where monks and nuns live, study, and practice their religion. Buddhism and Jainism had not yet emerged during the Harappan period, so there were no monasteries. During the age of the Mahajanapadas, monasteries became important centers of learning and religion. Literature. The Harappans had their own script, which can be seen on seals and other objects. However, even after many years of research, scholars have not deciphered the Harappan script. This means we still do not know exactly what those symbols mean. Because the script remains undeciphered, we cannot read their records, stories, or literature. Unlike the Harappans, people during the second urbanization left behind many written texts, especially those related to Buddhism, Jainism, and other traditions. Trade. Trade was important in both periods. The Harappans traded within India and with distant regions. Similarly, trade expanded greatly during the age of the Mahajanapadas, especially with the introduction of coins. Warfare. There is very little evidence of warfare in the Harappan civilization. During the age of the Mahajanapadas, however, kingdoms sometimes fought wars and also formed alliances. Therefore, warfare is generally associated with the second urbanization. Copper or bronze. Both civilizations used copper and bronze. The Harappans were especially skilled in bronze technology, and these metals continued to be used during the second urbanization. Iron. Iron was not used by the Harappans. One of the major innovations of the second urbanization was the widespread use of iron tools and weapons. Next is the Varna-Jati system. We saw earlier how human societies grew more complex with the rise of civilization. Whenever this happens, a society organizes itself in several groups based on class, occupation, or some other criteria. For instance, there could be different groups concerned with governance, administration, religion, education, trade, town planning, farming, crafts, arts, and all kinds of other professions. The terms Varna and Jāti are often used together, but they do not mean exactly the same thing. In this section, we will understand what Varna and Jāti mean, how the system developed, and how it influenced the lives of people in ancient India. So, as human societies became larger and more advanced, they also became more complex. Complex means having many parts and activities. A small village may have only a few types of work, but a large civilization needs many different people performing different roles. As ancient civilizations grew, people began organizing themselves into different groups based on their occupation, responsibilities, or social roles. Some people were involved in governance and administration, helping to run the kingdom. Others focused on religion and education. Some became traders while others worked as farmers, craftsmen, artists, or builders. This division of work helped society function more efficiently because different people could specialize in different tasks. So, as civilizations became more developed, societies naturally organized themselves into various groups, each performing important duties for the community. In an ideal society, all those groups would complement each other and work in harmony. But most of the time, these divisions also lead to inequalities. Some groups acquire more wealth, power, or influence than others. In other words, while equality is an ideal that human societies have often aspired to, very few, if any, have ever achieved it. So, in an ideal society, all groups of people would work together and help one another. Different groups in society would perform their duties and contribute to the well-being of everyone. However, in reality, things are often not so balanced. When societies are divided into different groups, some groups may gradually gain more wealth, power, or influence than others. As a result, not everyone enjoys the same opportunities or status. This leads to inequality, which means that some people have more advantages than others. For example, one group may have greater access to resources, education, or positions of authority. Throughout history, many societies have aimed for equality, where everyone is treated fairly and has similar opportunities. It is an ideal that people have often aspired to achieve. However, very few societies have been able to achieve complete equality. So, while dividing society into different groups can help it function efficiently, it can also create differences and inequalities among people. In simple words, we can say that division of work can help society run smoothly, but it can also lead to inequalities if some groups gain more wealth, power, or influence than others. In India, the society was organized in a twofold system. One category was the Jati, a group or community of people with a specific professional occupation closely tied to their livelihood. The skills that defined a particular jati, for instance, skill in agriculture, metallurgy, commerce, or any craft, was generally transmitted from generation to generation. Often, a jati would get further subdivided into subjatis, each of which developed customs and traditions of its own, for instance, concerning marriage rituals or food habits. So, ancient Indian society was organized in a twofold system, which means it was based on two main categories. One of these categories was called Jati. A Jati was a group or community of people who usually followed the same occupation or profession. Their livelihood, which means the way they earned their living, was often connected to that occupation. For example, one Jati might consist of farmers, another of metal workers, traders, potters, carpenters, or weavers. The special skills needed for these occupations were usually passed down from parents to children. In this way, knowledge and expertise were preserved across generations. Over time, some jatis became very large and were further divided into subjatis. These smaller groups often developed their own customs and traditions. For example, they might have different rules regarding marriage, religious rituals, or food habits. So, a jati was not just an occupational group, it was also a community with its own traditions, customs, and way of life. Along with the jati, there is another category, that of Varna, a concept that emerged from Vedic text. There were four Varnas. Brahmins were engaged in preserving and spreading knowledge and in the performance of rituals. Kshatriyas were expected to defend the society and the land and to engage in warfare if necessary. Vaishyas were supposed to increase the society's wealth through occupations of trade, business, or agriculture. Finally, Shudras were the artisans, craftspeople, workers, or servants. So, we learned about jati in the previous para, which was mainly connected to a person's occupation and community. Now, the second category of the system, which is called Varna, comes from Vedic text. And according to this concept, society was divided into four Varnas, and each Varna was associated with certain duties and responsibilities. Brahmins were responsible for preserving and spreading knowledge. They studied and taught sacred texts and performed religious rituals. Kshatriyas were expected to protect the people and the kingdom. They acted as rulers, administrators, and warriors and fought in wars when necessary. Vaishyas were involved in activities that increased the wealth of society. They worked in trade, business, farming, and other occupations. Shudras included artisans, craftspeople, workers, and servants. They provided many essential services and produced a variety of useful goods. So, it is important to understand that the Varna system was a way of describing different roles and responsibilities within the society. Figure 4.5, a panel of the Sanchi Stupa depicting a smithy or metal workshop where different workers bring firewood, water, stoke the fire, beat the iron, etc. So, this panel from the Sanchi Stupa shows a smithy, which is a place where metal workers make or repair metal objects. So, different workers are performing different tasks here. Some are bringing firewood to keep the furnace burning, others are carrying water, some are stoking the fire to make it hotter, while others are beating and shaping the heated iron. This picture helps us understand that metal working was not a one-person job. It required the cooperation of many skilled workers, each performing a specific task. Such workshops played an important role in producing tools, weapons, and other objects needed in daily life. The scene also shows that how advanced iron metallurgy had become during this period. People had developed specialized skills and worked together to produce iron goods efficiently. Figure 4.6, a few punch-marked coins from various ancient cities of North India. So, this figure shows some punch-marked coins which were among the earliest coins used in ancient India. These coins were made by taking pieces of metal, usually silver, and stamping symbols onto them using special punches. That is why they are called punch-marked coins. So, coins have different symbols on them. These symbols could represent the kingdom, city, authority, or other important marks used at that time. Since different ancient cities and Mahajanapadas issued their own coins, the symbols often varied from one region to another. Let's explore. Why should a complex society divide itself into such groups? Think about several possible factors why this happens. So here you need to think why large and complex societies divide people into different groups. So as society grows larger, many different types of work need to be done. One person cannot do everything. Therefore, people divide themselves into different groups and occupations. This division of work helps society run smoothly because each group can focus on a specific task and become skilled at it. It also helps important skills and knowledge passed from one generation to the next. List other such professions you expect in a complex society of the first millennium BCE. So, a complex society needs many different kinds of workers to function properly. Besides farmers, traders, rulers and craftsmen, there would have been many other professions during the first millennium BCE. For example, there may have been teachers, priests, soldiers, doctors or healers, potters, carpenters, blacksmiths and metal workers, etc. All these professions helped meet the needs of society and contributed to its growth and development. Don't miss out. You may have heard the English word caste. It comes from a Portuguese word casta, as Portuguese travelers to India in the 16th century CE tried to make sense of Indian society. While a few scholars consider caste to refer to Varnas, most take it to apply to Jatis. Yet others consider caste to refer to the whole Varna-Jati system. So, the word caste comes from the Portuguese word casta. When Portuguese travelers came to India in the 16th century CE, they tried to understand how Indian society was organized. To describe the different social groups they saw, they used the word casta, from which the English word caste developed. However, scholars do not all agree on exactly what the word caste refers to. Some scholars use it for the Varna system, which divides society into 4 broad groups. Others use it for Jatis, which are the many occupational communities found in society. Still others use the term caste to refer to the entire Varna-Jati system. So, the word caste is a broad term that different scholars interpret in different ways. There is historical evidence both in text and inscriptions that in the early period, individuals and communities changed their professional occupations as circumstances demanded. For instance, a long drought or some natural calamity could force a community of farmers to migrate to a city and take up other occupations, or some Brahmins would turn to trade or even military activities. This complex system structured Indian society, organized its activities including economic ones, and therefore gave it some stability. In time, however, the system became rigid and led to inequalities and discrimination towards the lower Jatis or some communities excluded from the Varna-Jati system. This process will be studied in a higher grade. So, We might think that in ancient India, a person could never change their occupation. However, historical evidence tells us that this was not always true. We know from text and inscriptions that in the early period, people and communities sometimes changed their occupations when circumstances required. For example, imagine a village facing a long drought. If crops failed and farming became impossible, farmers might migrate to a city and take up different occupations to earn a living. Similarly, some Brahmins did not always remain teachers or priests. They sometimes became traders or even took part in military activities. This shows that the Varna-Jati system was not completely fixed in its early stages. People could adapt to changing situations when necessary. The system also helped organize society. Since different groups had different responsibilities, people knew what work they had to do. This helped society run smoothly and remain well organized. However, over time the system became more rigid, meaning less flexible. As this happened, some groups gained higher status while others faced inequalities and discrimination. In particular, lower jatis and some communities outside the Varna-Jati system were often treated unfairly. We will learn more about these developments and their consequences in higher classes. The Varna-Jati system has had a deep impact on Indian society and generations of scholars have studied its countless aspects. There is a broad agreement that the system was significantly different, more flexible in particular in earlier periods and became more rigid with the passage of time, in particular during the British rule in India. Let us also keep in mind that while Varna-Jati has been an important mechanism at work in Indian society, it is not the only one. There have been many others, some of which we will explore later, especially in the theme our cultural heritage and knowledge traditions. So, the Varna-Jati system has influenced Indian society for a very long time. Because of its importance, many scholars have studied it from different angles to understand how it worked and how it changed over time. One interesting point is that most scholars agree that the system was more flexible in the early periods. This means that people had greater freedom and the rules were not as strict as they became later. However, as time passed, the system gradually became more rigid, meaning less flexible and more fixed. According to many scholars, this process became even stronger during British rule in India. It is also important to remember that the Varna-Jati system was only one way in which Indian society was organized. Indian society was influenced by many other factors, traditions and social systems as well. As we continue our study of history, especially in the theme our cultural heritage and knowledge traditions, we will learn about some of these other influences and understand how they helped shape Indian society. Think about it. Inequalities within society can exist in many forms. Have you encountered any incident where you or anyone you know might have been made to feel different from others? Do you think equality is desirable in a society? If so, why? Have you come across people or initiatives that lessened inequalities? So, you need to think about equality and inequality in society. Inequality means that some people are treated differently or do not get the same opportunities as others. This can happen because of a person's background, economic condition, gender, language, religion, disability, or many other reasons. When everyone is treated fairly and given equal opportunities, people feel respected and can develop their talents and abilities. Equality also helps create a more peaceful and united society. So, you can write the answer as yes. Equality is desirable in a society because it ensures that everyone is treated fairly and gets equal opportunities. Inequalities can make people feel excluded or disadvantaged. Efforts such as education, scholarships, and social welfare programs help reduce inequalities and create a more inclusive society. Developments elsewhere in India. So far we have mainly learned about the developments taking place in the Ganga plains during the age of the Janapadas and Mahajanapadas. But do you think important changes were happening only in one part of India? Of course not. Different regions of India were also developing in their own ways. People were building settlements, engaging in trade, practicing agriculture, and creating their own cultures and traditions. So, in this section, we will explore what was happening in other parts of India during the same period and see how different regions contributed to the growth of Indian civilization. In this first millennium BC, important communication routes opened up for purposes of trade, pilgrimage, military campaigns, etc. Two routes became widely used and are often mentioned in the literature, the Uttarapatha and the Dakshinapatha. The first connected the northwestern regions to the Ganga plains all the way to eastern India. The second started from Kaushambi near Prayagraj, then a capital of one of the Mahajanapadas, and crossed the Vindhya range of hills to proceed all the way south. We will return to these routes when we explore the formation of empires in India. So, as trade, travel, and kingdoms expanded, people needed better ways to move from one place to another. During the first millennium BC, some important communication routes developed across India. These routes were used by traders carrying goods, pilgrims visiting sacred places, and armies traveling during military campaigns. In this way, they helped connect different regions of the country. Two famous routes are often mentioned in ancient literature. Uttarapatha. This route connected the northwestern regions of India with the Ganga plains and extended all the way to eastern India. Dakshinapatha. This route began from Kaushambi, an important city near present-day Prayagraj, and crossed the Vindhya hills and continued towards southern India. These routes played an important role in the movement of people, goods, and ideas across the country. They helped different regions stay connected and contributed to the growth of trade and cultural exchange. Later, when we study the rise of empires in India, we will see how these routes became even more important. Many lateral roads also connected with other parts of India, especially the important ports on the western and eastern coast, which were vibrant centers of trade. In the eastern region, major cities emerged such as Shishupalgarh, today Sisupalgarh, part of Bhubaneswar, which was the capital of the Kalinga region and followed a strict square ground plan with imposing fortifications and broad streets. So, besides the Uttarapatha and Dakshinapatha, there were many smaller connecting roads called lateral roads that linked different parts of India. These roads connected inland regions with important ports on the western and eastern coast. Ports were busy centers where traders bought and sold goods and where ships carried products to distant regions. In the eastern part of India, several important cities developed. One such city was Shishupalgarh, present-day Sisupalgarh near Bhubaneswar. It was the capital of the Kalinga region. And what makes this city special is that the planned layout. It was built in a square shape with strong fortifications, that is protective walls around it and wide streets inside. This shows that the city was carefully planned and well organized. So, during this period, not only trade routes but also well-planned cities were developing in different parts of India. Figure 4.7, Shishupalgarh, today a suburb of Bhubaneswar, first excavated in 1948, one of the gateways into the city. To the fortifications, the moat full of water is visible outside the gateway. Notice the narrowing in the gateway for control of movement of people and goods. So, this figure gives us a glimpse of Shishupalgarh, an ancient city in the Kalinga region. And what we see here is one of the city's gateways. The gateway passes through the city's strong fortifications or protective walls. Outside the wall, we can see a moat filled with water. The moat acted as a defensive barrier, making it more difficult for enemies to enter the city. And the narrow entrance made it easier for guards to monitor and control the movement of people, animals, carts, and goods entering or leaving the city. So, ancient cities like Shishupalgarh were carefully planned and had systems for both security and administration. In the subcontinent's southern region, cities began emerging from about 400 BCE. although recent excavations claim to find some signs of commercial activities going further back. Around this time, three kingdoms emerged: the Cholas, the Cheras, and the Pandyas. Apart from archaeological evidence, the most ancient Tamil literature mentions those kingdoms and several of their kings. So, while cities and kingdoms were developing in northern and eastern India, important changes were also taking place in the southern regions of the Indian subcontinent. From about 400 BCE, cities began to emerge in southern India. In fact, recent archaeological discoveries suggest that trade and commercial activities may have started even earlier. Around this time, three important kingdoms rose to prominence. They are Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas. These kingdoms played a major role in the history of southern India. And how do historians know about them? One source is archaeological evidence such as ancient buildings, pottery, coins and other objects discovered through excavations. Another important source is ancient Tamil literature, which mentions these kingdoms and several of their rulers. This shows that southern India was also witnessing the growth of cities, trade and powerful kingdoms during this period. Figure 4.8, timeline covering the period from 1900 BCE to 300 BCE. So, this timeline helps us understand when the important developments took place. Around 1900 BCE, the urban phase of the Harappan civilization came to an end. After about 1200 BCE, a new phase of urban growth gradually began in India. This period is called the second urbanization because towns and cities started developing again after the decline of the Harappan cities. 1200 to 400 BCE, age of the Janapadas. During this period, many Janapadas, that is small territorial states, developed in different parts of India. People organized themselves into communities and occupations. Agriculture, trade, crafts and social systems such as the Varna-Jati system became more prominent. New religious and philosophical ideas including Buddhism and Jainism began to spread. 800 to 300 BCE, age of the Mahajanapadas. During these centuries, cities, trade, iron technology, kingdoms, literature and new religious ideas all developed and transformed Indian society. Figure 4.9, shell and gemstones industries at the site of Kodumanal near Erode, Tamil Nadu. So, these are all archaeological evidence discovered at Kodumanal near Erode in Tamil Nadu. Archaeologists found remains related to shell working and gemstone industries at this site. These discoveries include materials, tools and unfinished ornaments used in making beads and jewelry. It shows that people living in Kodumanal were skilled craftsmen and were engaged in specialized industries. It also suggests that trade and commercial activities were taking place in this region because such valuable products were often exchanged with other places. Therefore, the discoveries at Kodumanal provide important archaeological evidence that southern India had active craft industries and trade networks during this period. Because the southern regions are rich in resources such as precious and semi-precious stones, gold and spices, they profitably traded not only with the rest of India but also with kingdoms and empires overseas. So, traders from distant places were interested in southern India because southern regions were rich in valuable natural resources. This included precious stones, semi-precious stones, gold and spices. Such products were highly valued and were in great demand. Because of these resources, the people of southern India could trade profitably not only with the other parts of India but also with kingdoms and empires located overseas, that is, across the sea. As traders exchanged goods with distant regions, wealth increased and trade networks expanded. This helped the southern kingdoms grow and become important centers of commerce. By 300 or 200 BCE, almost the entire subcontinent, including regions in the northwest, was one vibrant interconnected land. Goods and culture travelled from region to region and often beyond India to parts of Central and Southeast Asia. So, by about 300 to 200 BCE, most parts of the Indian subcontinent had become closely connected with one another. This included not only northern, southern, eastern or western India, but also the northeast. Different regions were linked through trade routes, travel and cultural exchanges. As merchants, pilgrims, scholars and travelers moved from place to place, they carried goods, ideas, customs and knowledge with them. Because of this, different regions interacted more frequently and became part of a larger interconnected world. These connections did not stop at India's borders. Indian goods and cultural influences also traveled to regions of Central Asia and Southeast Asia, helping build links with other civilizations. So, by this time, the subcontinent had become a vibrant interconnected land where people, products and ideas moved across great distances. About the same time, the Mahajanapadas ceased to exist, leaving the place to fresh developments that were going to reshape India. So, by around 300 to 200 BC, the age of the Mahajanapadas was coming to an end. Many of these powerful kingdoms either disappeared, merged with larger states, or were absorbed into growing empires. In other words, the Mahajanapadas gradually ceased to exist as independent kingdoms. As one phase ended, a new one began. The decline of the Mahajanapadas created space for fresh developments, especially the rise of large empires that would unite vast regions of India under a single rule. These new developments would bring important changes in administration, trade, culture, art and society, reshaping the future of India. In the next chapters, we will learn about these powerful empires and how they transformed the Indian subcontinent. Before we move on, from the end of the second millennium BC, Janapadas rose in parts of north and central India. They were smaller states with a Raja at the head taking counsel from an assembly of elders. So, let's quickly recall what we have learned so far. From the end of the second millennium BC, many Janapadas emerged in parts of northern and central India. These were small territorial states where people lived under a common ruler. Each Janapada was headed by a Raja, that is, king. However, the king did not always make decisions alone. He was often guided by an assembly of elders, a group of experienced and respected people who advised him on important matters. This shows that even in ancient times, rulers often took advice from others while governing their kingdoms. The 16 Mahajanapadas were the first organized states of the first millennium BCE. They witnessed the second urbanization of India, which spread in all directions from the Ganga region all the way to South India. By 300 BCE or so, the Mahajanapadas ceased to exist. So, as time passed, some Janapadas grew larger and more powerful. These became known as the 16 Mahajanapadas, which were the first well-organized states of the first millennium BC. During their time, India experienced the second urbanization, a period when new towns and cities developed after the decline of the Harappan civilization. This urban growth began mainly in the Ganga region and gradually spread to many other parts of India, including southern India. Trade increased, iron technology became more common, cities expanded and communication routes connected different regions. As a result, different parts of the subcontinent became more closely linked. So, however, by around 300 BC, the age of the Mahajanapadas came to an end. Many of them were absorbed into larger kingdoms and empires, which would shape the next phase of Indian history. In the same period, a vast network of roads connected north and south, east and west, and eventually all regions of the subcontinent. People, goods, ideas, and teachings traveled along all those roads. So, during the age of the Mahajanapadas, not only were cities and kingdoms growing, but transportation and communication were also improving. A large network of roads connected the north, south, east, and west of the Indian subcontinent. These roads linked different regions and made travel much easier. Traders carried goods from one place to another. Pilgrims traveled to sacred sites. Scholars spread knowledge and monks and nuns shared their teachings. As a result, not only goods but also ideas, cultures, and religious teachings spread across different parts of India. These connections help bring people from various regions closer together. So with this, we have completed the part 2 of the chapter New Beginnings, Cities and States. I hope you found it easy to understand. If you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching. We will see you again in our next video. Bye bye.